Premier League Game Week 17 predictions. It's another big weekend of Premier League action to look forward to. We're obviously coming up to Christmas now, nearly midway through the season. And the Premier League table, the narrative is beginning to shape. Some very tasty fixtures to look forward to this weekend. Some very important ones, potentially, all over the table. So let's get straight into them. Starting off with the first game of the weekend, 12:30 on Saturday. Villa playing host to Manchester City at Villa Park. Now, this could be a huge game for both teams, but maybe even more so Manchester City. They are in dire need of a win, and a big win. It's now 8 losses in their last 11 after last weekend's capitulation in the last few minutes against Manchester United at the Etihad. They look all over the place. People have been saying for a while now, surely they're going to turn it around. Surely Pep will get things right eventually. I'm not sure that's actually going to happen, genuinely, because there's too many issues in that team at the moment. And if anything, it's ironic because he probably needs another few transfer windows to fix the current problems that they have. This is a really tough game. Obviously, Villa did lose last weekend, but they steadied the ship lately after quite a poor run of form for a while there, and they're very good at home. I do not see things changing for Manchester City in this game. Obviously, Villa have only lost once at home all season, and that was to Arsenal. I'm not ballsy enough to say Villa are going to win this game, even though I think they might. I'm going to go Aston Villa 2, Manchester City 2. We have Brentford at home to Nottingham Forest. Now, obviously, Brentford coming off a narrow loss at Stamford Bridge last weekend. Forest coming off a fantastic win with a late Anthony Elanga goal at the City ground last weekend against Aston Villa. Both these teams have been good this season. Obviously, Forest are somehow sat 4th and we're nearly at Christmas, which is absolutely crazy. But Brentford have been the best team at home all season. Their away form has not been very good, but there's no doubting what they have done at home so far this season is absolutely incredible. This is a tough one to predict, but I'm kind of feeling the same as I did for the first game. I think both of these cancel each other out. I think there will be a few goals, but I'm going to say Brentford 1, Nottingham Forest 1. Then we have Ipswich versus Newcastle. Newcastle with a big win last weekend against Ruud van Nistelrooy's Leicester 4-0 at home. Ipswich with a very important win for themselves at Molineux, beating Wolves 2-1. Obviously, Gary O'Neill got sacked just a day or two later. This, for me, I mean, Newcastle are that team who seem to struggle sometimes against teams that they should beat, and then against teams that they are not expected to get anything off. You know, the bigger teams, the Liverpools, the Cities, the Arsenals, whatever. I think this is a bit of a banana skin for Newcastle. I genuinely do. Ipswich at home so far this season have held a few teams. They have lost 4 or 5 games as well. But they haven't really been hammered in any game. And I do think Newcastle will win this game. But I am going to say something like Ipswich 1, Newcastle 3. Next we have West Ham playing host to Brighton. Now, Brighton, after a fantastic start to the season, have been on very, very poor form. Obviously, that shock result, really, I think that it was last weekend at home to Crystal Palace, who haven't been good this season at all, in that derby game, in which they lost 3-1. And they are without a win in their last 4 Premier League games. West Ham, in comparison, I'm not going to lie, I thought they were all right on Monday night against Bournemouth. They definitely deserved a point from it. I think a draw was a fair result in the end, but I'm not really seeing any direction with Julian Lopetegui. I think he's one bad loss away from really being in massive, massive trouble. And I'm actually going to say here that Brighton bounce back. Brighton get their first win in 5 games. West Ham 1, Brighton 2. Saturday evening, 5:30, Crystal Palace at home to Arsenal. Obviously, Arsenal are coming off the back of 2 disappointing draws. Granted, they went a goal down to Fulham and they came back and they got a draw, but it's a game they should have won, especially second half. They were all over them. And a very poor draw last weekend at home to Sean Dyche's Everton. Crystal Palace have really turned around their season after a really poor start. They're unbeaten in their last 5. They got a point at home to Manchester City in a game where they were the better team. They really should have won that game, even though at this moment in time, I don't think it's much of an achievement to get a result out of this Manchester City team. But they're coming off a fantastic win, as I previously mentioned, away at the Amex last weekend. This is a tough game for Arsenal. This is a Crystal Palace team that are now feeling more confident. This is a Crystal Palace team that the goals are flowing a lot more in now after certainly a dry patch for much of the start of the season. And Arsenal are going to have to be good here. And do you know what? Like, there might be bias kicking in, but I just don't think they win this game. I don't. I'm going to say Crystal Palace get a point. I feel like I am predicting a lot of draws. Crystal Palace 1, Arsenal 1. Then on to Sunday's games. Everton versus Chelsea at 2 o'clock. This is a game you would expect Chelsea to win. I mean, they've been on fantastic form. They've been on the best form in the Premier League over the last number of games. They had a solid win last weekend against Brentford. Everton got a very good result away at the Emirates, getting a point. But with how Chelsea are playing at the moment, the likes of Nicholas Jackson and Moises Caicedo, Madueke, Cole Palmer, so many players in form right now. I think Cucurella is actually missing for this game, which is a bit of a blow. Look, they should have too much. And Everton are another team who I think will just be languishing in around the bottom 5 for the entire season, whether they're going to stay up or not. Obviously, they will be motivated with the fact that they held Arsenal to a clean sheet last weekend, which was crazy. But I don't see them getting anything here. And I actually see Chelsea scoring a few goals. I'm going to say Everton 0, Chelsea 3. Then at the same time on Sunday, we have Fulham at home to Southampton. Southampton obviously coming off an absolute smashing last weekend to Spurs. It was 5-0 in the first half. The game, luckily enough for Southampton, ended 5-0. Russell Martin has been sacked since. And time will tell whether Southampton are going to improve anyways more after our post-Russell Martin era. We shall see. As for Fulham, as a Liverpool fan, I thought they were really good. They were impressive last weekend against Liverpool at Anfield. Liverpool had to be really good, especially with 10 men, to get a point out of that game. I thought the likes of Alex Iwobi was really good. Anthony Robinson was excellent. Muniz was good when he came on. Obviously, he got a goal as well. Raul Jimenez was decent too. There's a lot of quality in that Fulham side. I really like Marco Silva, and I think he can certainly take them to like top 8 maybe even this season, but certainly comfortably inside the top 10. They are good enough for that. They certainly deserve to be where they are in the Premier League table at the moment. I can't see past Fulham in this game. I'm going to say Fulham 2, Southampton 0. Leicester coming up at home against Wolves. Obviously, as I mentioned, Gary O'Neill was relieved of his duties after last weekend's very disappointing home loss to Ipswich Town. And this is a big game, pretty much straight away. And obviously, last week, no, stop that. And this is a big game pretty much instantly after for Wolves. It's as simple as that. Coming up against Leicester, obviously, one of the promoted sides from last season, and you would be expecting Wolves to get something in this game. Under Ruud van Nistelrooy, they have looked a lot better. They've got a couple of good wins. They did take a bad beating last weekend at St James's Park, but at St James's Park and against Newcastle, that happens. Wolves apparently right now have a deal in place to bring in Vitor Pereira, a Portuguese manager who was managing Al-Shabaab, I think, over in Saudi Arabia. So we will see how he gets on. We'll see if he changes anything in terms of an upturn in form for Wolves. There is a few Portuguese players there. Maybe he might have some sort of a connection with players like that to change Wolves' fortunes out of what so far has been an absolutely terrible season. I don't know. I'm kind of struggling with this one. Obviously, it looks like it's going to be Pereira's first game in charge. We don't know much about him. Leicester, I would say, are favourites in this game. I'm going to say a draw and just sit on the fence. Leicester 2, Wolves 2. Then we have the last of the 2 o'clocks on Sunday. Manchester United playing host to Bournemouth at Old Trafford. Obviously, United coming off a huge win last weekend against their city rivals, Manchester City, in a game where I think they actually deserved to win. To be honest, City didn't do very much. And fair play to United. They got the 2 goals at the end and they got the win. Obviously, Amad Diallo instrumental in that. He has been very, very good this season. And look, Bournemouth are a good side. They're very well managed from Andoni Iraola. Some good form. They have 3 wins out of their last 4 Premier League games. They got a point on Monday at home to West Ham in what was really an evenly contested game. This is a difficult game for United. Bournemouth can play. Bournemouth can well play. And it wouldn't surprise me if United drop points in this game. But I am going to say morale booster of last weekend. They do just enough here. Manchester United 2, Bournemouth 1. And finally, the last game of the weekend and arguably the biggest. Spurs against Liverpool at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Now, as a Liverpool fan, I'm really nervous for this game. Obviously, we have dropped points in our last 2 games. You have to put that into context. Against Newcastle, Liverpool weren't good. Still probably should have won the game if it wasn't for a mistake at the end. But, you know, it wasn't just a mistake in that game. It was a number of things. Last weekend against Fulham, did very well against a good side, playing the vast majority of the game with 10 men and getting a point. But this is a game where we could do with winning, especially with what we're seeing, this resurgence from Chelsea this season. I do expect them, as I mentioned, to beat Everton. So I think even from our own, not thinking about anybody else, but even from our own point of view, just if we're going to say 2 games in a row dropping points is a blip, then call it that. Obviously, as I said, it's very different when you put it into context for the reasons I mentioned. But this would be a big game for Liverpool to win. And Spurs always seem to play well against us. Obviously, they were on a really poor run of form there. They lost away to Bournemouth in what was a toothless performance. They bottled a 2-goal lead at home to Chelsea. Barely got a point against Rangers last week in the Europa League. But they did come back in typical Spurs fashion just before Liverpool with a big win against Southampton last weekend. And obviously Southampton are not a good side at all right now. And the manager was sacked the next day. So they were playing them at the best time. But Spurs always turn up against us. And I think this is going to have plenty of goals in it. Obviously Diogo Jota is back and should start, which is huge for Liverpool. That, look, most of the chances we get, we will take. I'm nervous. I won't be surprised if we drop points because Spurs are that team, but I do expect us to win. I am going to say Spurs 2, Liverpool 3. And that is my Premier League predictions for Game Week 17. Please like the video if you've enjoyed it and subscribe to my channel if you are new. I would really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this, then let me know in the comments. Anyway, let's hope it's another good weekend. Let's hope it's another good weekend for Liverpool, more importantly. And thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.